Radhe Radhe. Today is Saturday, 18th March 2023. Here in this recap video, we're now going to present a recap of today's Bhagavad Gita recitation session, where we are in the continuing journey of chapter 8 and all its wonderful content and learning items. Along with me is Mummy.
Radhe Radhe.
Bringing up the screen, we'll start off with recitation. We covered chapter 8, verses 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Then Mummy will walk us through an important word or two each, and then I'll explain briefly, and then we'll hear another round of the recitation. So, chapter 8, verse 6 and beyond.
Chapter 8, verse 6. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajatyante kalevaram tam tam evaiti konteya sada tad bhava bhavitaha tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmara yudhya cha mai arpit mano buddhihi mam eveshyasya sanshayam abhyasa yoga yuktena cetasa nanyagamina paramam purusham divyam yati parthanuchintayan Kavim Puranam Anushasitaram Anoraniyasam Anusmaredyaha Sarvasya Dhataram Achintya Rupam Aditya Varnam Tamasa Parastat Prayana Kale Manasa Achalena Bhaktya yukto yoga balena chaiva bhruvor madhye pranam aveshya samyak satam param purusham upaiti divyam yadaksharam veda vido vadanti vishanti yadayatayo vitaragaha Yadichanto brahmacharyam charanti tatte padam sangrahena pravakshe. So let's see one important word from each verse. So from verse number 6, let's look at the word bhava bhavitaha. Bhava bhavitaha means absorbed in contemplation. From verse number 7, there is a word called anusmara. Anusmara means remember. Remembering God's name all the time. Chapter 8, there is a very important word, abhyas yog. That means by practice of yog. And also, let's look at the word yukten. Yukten means being constantly engaged in remembrance of God. Verse number 9, a very beautiful word for God, that is Aditya Varnam. Aditya Varnam means effulgent like the sun. God is effulgent like the sun. Aditya Varnam. Then verse number 10, very important word is achalen. Achalen means where your mind does not wander. It remains steady, steadily. Verse number 11, it's repetition, but this word is very important. That is aksharam. Aksharam means imperishable. So over to you, Gagan, for explanation of the verses.
Thank you, Mummy. Let's look at all of these. So, chapter 8, verse 6. Catchphrase here, oh dear. Deer here is D-E-E-R. That is the animal, of course. And the story that Swamiji provides in the commentary is to do with King or Maharaj Bharat, his attraction to a baby deer that distracted him away in his final days, away from his sadhana and devotion and spirituality, so much so that in his final moments, he was thinking about the deer, and therefore in his next life, he became, no surprise, a deer. But because of his, great spiritual sadhana and prior karmas, even as a deer, he strayed very close to ashrams. And so in the next life, he came back as sage Jara Bharat, and then eventually was able to attain the Supreme Lord. The takeaway for this verse, chapter 8, verse 6, is that Sri Krishna says, whatever we think about in those final moments at the time of death, that's the state we attain. So to be able to attain God, it is important to have a lifelong habit and practice of contemplating upon God. Only then will our inner nature be united with God. And with that inner nature united with God, we have a chance at the time of death, even in that pain, to think about God and then be united actually with God, meaning attaining God, attaining yoga. Chapter 8, verse 7 has a question. The catchphrase is, fight after surrender. Obviously, when you surrender, you don't fight anymore. But in this case, it is surrendering to God. In fact, this is Sri Krishna saying, surrender the mind and the intellect to God. And this verse, in fact, in the commentary, it encapsulates Karma Yoga. You perform all your worldly duties with your body, but you have your mind and all the intention and even the fruits dedicated towards God. So Swamiji, in a very funny way in the commentary, says that this is not to be mistaken as karma and yoga, which is what many people do. They'll do karma, which is their regular work throughout the day, and then a few minutes of yoga or sadhana at night, and think that that is karma yoga. No, it is about constantly doing everything we have to do in our material world, but constantly having the intention and the mindset towards God. And that is, a way of looking at it numerically, Swamiji says, is you look at multiplication by 0. You don't get bound in the law of karma when you dedicate everything to God. So even if you do a lot of work, think of that as a very large number. You multiply by 0, it's still 0, meaning 0 karma. So you're not bound by those karmic reactions. Chapter 8, verse 8, devotion without deviation. Sri Krishna requests us to practice our devotion and not have deviation. And so in this verse, he's saying that the consequence of Karma Yoga is to, of course, attain God. And the key word Mummy mentioned is abhyas, which we saw way back in chapter 6. This is that constant practice of, spiritual habits and, of course, meditation as well. And that is what is not at fixed times of the day, but throughout the day. And that helps us get our mind purified. And when the mind is purified, eventually we can, of course, attain God. In fact, we'll get it through the grace of God, getting God's divine love, divine knowledge, and divine bliss, and therefore then have that union, that yoga with God. Chapter 8, verse 9 and 10, they go hand in hand. So chapter 8, verse 9 is propitious poet. Kavinam is the word used in the shloka. So that is poet or seer. So one of the many, many praises and names for God, propitious referring to God being favorable and merciful to us. And in the next verse, the catchphrase is chapter 8, verse 10, glabella to God. Glabella is the portion between the two eyebrows. So we're talking about Sri Krishna briefly mentioning, Yog Mishra Bhakti and Ashtanga Yoga, when we have our, pran, the life airs, channeled through the Sushumna Nadi, all the way up the spine and into the glabella, the portion between the eyebrows, the inner eye, as they call it, and focus deeply, contemplate deeply on the Supreme Lord. Then one can, of course, attain Sri Krishna. The other thing about here in chapter 8, verse 9 and also 10 is there are many names for God, and 8 different qualities, in fact, are presented of God, such as I said, poet, or subtler than the subtlest, the support of all. And these are different qualities or aspects or forms that one can meditate upon. Finally, chapter 8, verse 11, finding the formless. So as Mummy said, imperishable, aksharam. So many names for God that are presented. And again, aksharam, that refers to God as the imperishable, the formless aspect. It's a very difficult aspect to meditate upon or try to attain, which is why Sri Krishna says that he'll only talk about that path very, very briefly. it requires a lot of severe austerities, and then that kind of energy gets converted into spiritual energy. But again, Sri Krishna says that path is not suitable for most people, which is why he talks about it briefly. But certainly it is one way to attain God. We shall once again then listen to a rendition of chapter 8, verse 6, all the way through chapter 8, verse 11.
Yeah, and before reciting them again, I want to bring your attention that 3 of the verses are normal shlokas, which are sung in Anustubh meter. These have 32 syllables in all, 4 padas, and each pada is 8 syllables. So there is the meter which is being used to sing is Anustubh meter. And the last 3 verses, 9, 10, and 11, they are in Tristubh meter because they have total 44 syllables, 11 syllables each in each pada. So the singing meter used there is Tristubh meter. So let's start, and you can make out the difference between the 2 singing meters. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajatyante kalevaram tam tam evaiti kaunteya sada tad bhava bhavitaha tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmara yudhya cha mai arpit mano buddhihi mam evashyasya sanshayam abhyasa yoga yuktena chetasa nanyagamina paramam purusham divyam yati parthanuchintayan kavim puranam anushasitaram anor aniyanasam anusmaredya sarvasya dhataram achintya rupam aditya varnam tamasah parastat prayana kale manasa achalena bhaktya yukto yoga balena chaiva bhruvor madhye pranam aveshya samyak satam param purusham upaiti divyam yadaksharam vedavido vadanti vishanti yadayatayo vitaragaha yadichanto brahmacharyam charanti tatte padam sangrahena pravakshe. So hope it helps to revise these verses and do practice. Of course, they are quite easy. As Krishna says, abhyas, 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 practice, practice, practice. So thank you very much. Over to you, Gagan.
Yeah, thank you, Mummy. So once again, that was chapter 8, verses 6 through 11. Just a reminder that in case you would like these slides and the other relevant material, please do look at the description for this video or directly look at this QR code. Capture that in your phone, camera, mobile app, and you'll be able to access our community portal page for this series. And as I said, get all this continuing material week upon week. As always, we look forward to seeing you next time then. This class, Bhagavad Gita Recitation, both study and recitation next Saturday, 25th March 2023. So recitation same time, 11 a.m. Central, 9:30 p.m. India, because of daylight saving time in North America. And prior to that, Bhagavad Gita study, 8 a.m. Central, 6:30 p.m. India time. Till then, of course, happy learning and spiritual journeys. Thank you so much. Radhe Radhe.
Radhe Radhe.